Good day. Epic fantasy was a genre of fiction that I completely disdained until the far-off days of 2010. In that year, I was introduced to good epic fantasy via my best friend of the time and an epic fan. The best friend introduced me to two video games, Dragon Age Origins and the then fairly new Elder Scrolls IV: Oblivion. The epic fan introduced me to the single greatest epic fantasy setting of all time, Warhammer, by recommending the Go Trek and Felix novel series. After that fateful year, I saw the fantasy genre of fiction as more than just ignorant science fiction and appreciated it on its own merits. In the intervening 13 years, I've come to the conclusion that fantasy is a very hard genre to write in, cause holy crap is most of it utter scheisse. But with that in mind, Warhammer Fantasy is most assuredly not scheisse. Warhammer Fantasy was a setting created by Games Workshop before 40k was even a fever dream of the god Emperor of mankind. Warhammer Fantasy started life as a tabletop game, but it was a very different tabletop game from 40k. 40k, the setting, can best be described as Warhammer Fantasy in space. All the elements that we know and love about 40k got their start in Warhammer Fantasy, but, and this is a big curvy bum, the Warhammer Fantasy world is nowhere near as dark, nor was it based around 2000 AD styled satire either. Instead, it was just a darker fantasy universe than what was normally seen in its day, and by today's standards, Warhammer Fantasy is pretty light. Sadly, Warhammer Fantasy never got nearly as popular as Warhammer 40k, and GW shit-canned it when it didn't sell enough little plastic crack, and they cancelled it by blowing up its universe and creating the Age of Sigmar. Raise middle finger. The Warhammer world, and it has no other name, is a world based somewhat on Earth. At least in terms of its geography, it has two moons, Morsleb and Mansleb. One of the moons is made of a magical substance called warpstone. The world features the species of humans, dwarves, elves, both dark and not, orcs spelled with a C, goblins, they are different from orcs, halflings, which are similar to but legally distinct from hobbits, and chaos. Yes, the four chaos gods were present in Warhammer Fantasy. They invade the world via the polar gates, and like in 40k, the old ones, aka space toads coast to coast, created the various species upon the Warhammer world. They travel the galaxy via warp gates, and when the old ones' empire fell, the warp gate on the Warhammer world destabilized and let chaos into the Warhammer planet. And now the species of order face an eternal battle against the forces of the primordial annihilator. This is most often expressed by battles against cultists and dudes in magical black armor. Many human tribes live in what are called the Chaos Wastes, and they will periodically invade the lands of order. The most powerful of the factions in the Warhammer world is the Imperium of Man. This is a German-styled Holy Roman Empire faction. Warhammer, instead of being based upon generic Brit fantasy, is instead based upon the Germans. The Empire in this setting is far better than its 40k equivalent, because it does not abhor the Xeno. Instead, it works with both good elves and dwarves, and only oppresses its people due to having a 1600 levels of technology. The Imperium is led by Emperor Karl Franz of the House of the Second Wilhelm. He wields the hammer that gives this and 40k its name, Galmaraz, a mighty hammer forged by the dwarves and given to the man god Sigma. 2,000 years prior to the novel we will be reviewing today, Sigmar Umberogan forged the Imperium. He was just a man and not a god, and by his hammer did he conquer the lands of man and forge an empire to fight the various foes of humanity, mainly orcs. But also, he fights an evil necromancer as well, and that necromancer will periodically attack humanity from time to time. Eventually, he left his throne and ventured into the Chaos Wastes to fight the Dark Gods, never to be seen again. It is ambiguous if he is a god at all, because while he is worshipped as a god by the Empire of Warhammer Fantasy, he is not the only god the Empire worships. They worship several gods, and those gods are confirmed to exist. Dwarves also have their own gods, and they have been confirmed to exist as well, and the dwarves themselves have been allied to the Empire for 2,000 years. The dwarves have a variable tech scale. They have steam power, and oil, and flying machines, and Gatling guns, but they still use swords and axes. They are longer lived than humans, and they have a decaying empire. They do have cities underground, but they are not Flanderized, and many dwarves will live upon the surface and amongst humans. Unto this world of danger and misery come two heroes, Guttrick, Gurnison, and Felix Jaeger. Guttrick is a dwarven slayer sworn to find his doom for a past shame. He wields the magical axe of, spoiler alert, magic of magicness that lets him stomp anything. Felix Jaeger is a human poet that got into trouble during a tax riot. Yeah, tell me about it. He meets Guttrick and in true German tradition gets shit-faced drunk, and while shit-faced drunk, he swears an oath to record Guttrick's doom in an epic poem. He wields a slightly less epic longsword taken from a cave. As there is nothing new under the sun, these two characters are somewhat inspired by Fafford and the Grey Mouser by Fritz Lieber. I've never read these books, but I know if I don't mention it, I'll get dinged for that. Guttrick and Felix were first written by William King, and the first novel was an anthology of short stories called Trollslayer. This novel was published by Black Library in 1999. The series would go on to feature 12 novels, the last of which pissed me off to no end because it featured the world blowing up due to poor model sales. Thank you, 40K, bastards. Anyway, I reviewed my favorite novel out of the series, Demon Slayer, way back in 2013, so we probably gotta recap that. In that novel, Guttrick and Felix got on a dwarven-made, oil-powered airship and headed straight to Hell, aka the Chaos Waste. They went there to secure a magical dwarven warhammer. By Sigmar, do I love Warhammer fantasy. Today's novel, Dragonslayer, carries on from that story. All the various Guttrick and Felix novels are titled in the same way, and Guttrick always gets his man, or beast, whatever. So at the end of Demon Slayer, Guttrick and Felix had just kicked the shit out of a bloodthirster of Khorne. Guttrick cut him up with an axe, while Felix proved himself worthy, and was thus able to cast the mighty dwarven warhammer at the foul abomination, and thus were the dynamic duo able to vanquish the foul demon. A bloodthirster is basically a Tolkien Balrog on all the roids. A bloody Grey Knight kill team from Warhammer 40k had trouble with one, and our dudes rocked one with an axe and a hammer, and they both survived and accomplished their objective. The main plot of Dragonslayer is what you would imagine. The dynamic duo have to take out a dragon. So on their way back to the Lands of Order from Hell, the airship Guttrick and Felix used to travel all the way to Hell to get the Warhammer comes under attack by a giant dragon. This dragon has been mutated by Warpstone. This novel introduces later Guttrick and Felix antagonists, Chaos Sorcerers, Goldstaff, and Blackstaff. They infect the dragon and set him on the path to try to take down the airship. Felix gets powered up by a sword that turns out runs on anime powers and thus gives him burning justice, at least when dragons are about. The airship can defend itself and tries blasting the crap out of the dragon, but to no avail. The airship also carried magical dwarven airplanes. In 2010, when I first read this, I was bloody floored by how epic that was. Picture this, if you will, dear viewer. You have a kaiju-sized dragon attacking a dirigible. That dirigible is shooting the shit out of the dragon, and planes are doing strafing runs on it all the while. A dwarf is holding a huge axe and calling it a pussy, and a German guy with a magical sword is calling himself a bane to all dragonkind. Oh, and the guy who built the airship and who is flying it is Scottish. Best fantasy book ever. Go screw yourself, Game of Thrones. The battle with the dragon ends on an epic/bittersweet note. In the previous novel, Demon Slayer, a dwarf named Varric was introduced. He was a youngin' and kind of annoyed Felix, cause old Varric, yes, I know Dragon Age 2 ripped the name off, and no, neither character is alike, cause Varric is a nerd of the best variety. He studies a lot, but also likes to blow shit up and loves his hand grenades. In Dragonslayer, we see some of the events from his perspective, and he talks about how he's gonna write it all in his book someday, but then realizes that none of the dwarven attacks are doing anything to the dragon, and so he decides to tie the rising sun to his forehead and shouts "Tenno Banzai!" and rams the dragon with his plane. Since Varric had a shit ton of characterization, I felt that one when I first read the novel, and I was like, no! And even though Felix was kind of annoyed by the bloody nerd, he also says no! Varric's attack drives the dragon off, and the airship, aka the Spirit of Grungnai, is able to dock at a dwarven city that's nearby. And thus, we've got the plot, ladies and gentlemen. The captain of the airship is a Scottish dwarf named Malcolai Malkinson, and he swears revenge against the dragon for busting up the ship. Oh yeah, and Varric too. Guttrick is always looking for a fight, and thus he and Felix are in. A subplot in the novel is the well-done love triangle between Felix and a fantasy Russian babe, aka Kislevite girl named Ulrika. and the sorcerer from the previous novel, Max Schreiber. The lion's share of the novel is cool dudes going on a quest to kick the crap out of a dragon. The love triangle thankfully never gets annoying, but spices up this quest a bit. The biggest waste of pages in the novel is Grey Seer Thankwall. So, a recurring villain in the Gotrek and Felix series is Grey Seer Thankwall, a villain that is so silly he may well have been voiced by Chris Latta. He is a member of the Skaven species, the rat bastards from the Vermintide games. He is always scheming to take over the world. However, he contributes nothing to this novel outside of leading an attack on our heroes in the very first few chapters of this book. The rest of the novel just has him trying to get to safety. If that crap had been dumped, the novel would have been much better for it. William King was the master of fantasy though. He knew what to focus on most of the time and what to leave up to the reader's imagination. He himself was quite imaginative and gave us cool shit we had never read before, and outside of Thankwall, never gave us endless filler like other fantasy writers love to do. William King was also able to create really compelling characters. Felix Jaeger is my favorite fantasy character of all time and my third favorite fictional character overall, with Han the Man and Caiaphas Cain being my first two favorites. Felix is not generic hero dude. Instead, he is just a man. He has his good days and his bad days. When he has to fight a dynamic hellbeast, he gets scared, but powers through that fear and kicks the shit out of it. He is caring of others and will only take credit when it is due. But he is not a Gary Stu. He gets his ass beat, and he can act like an asshole, especially when he gets hammered, and he is a German, so he does that a lot. He is also a relatable hero in that he has flaws, but works to overcome them. The other side characters do their job well, and the Russian Ulrika, well, she's a cool babe, and I can see why so many fantasy heroes want her. Gotrek is a walking axe, but that works. William King will only tease you with Gotrek, thus keeping him cool and mysterious. All told, Dragonslayer is a damn fine novel and a worthy sequel to the already epic Demon Slayer, and I hope it is never adapted into a movie or TV show. And if you never really read fantasy before, this is not a bad place to start. Oh, you probably should start with, Demon Slayer, but still. Now that all the normies scrammed to buy the book, let's get specific here. Before the two bros even make it back to the lands of man, they see a giant chaos army, like Mongol-sized, and it's headed straight to Ulrika's homeland of Kislev. So the bros gotta warn everybody and get ready for war. And so during the whole cool dragon slaying plot, that is in the back of their mind like the sword of bloody Damocles. The dragon itself is a major threat because it's already done a lot of damage to the local trade routes, and this has caused a lot of instability. You got an orc army going to Viking, and the humans from dragon-destroyed villages have founded a bandito army too. Ulrika really needs to warn the Kislevite leader, aka the Ice Queen, yes, that's her name, but she can't do that due to all that crap and the fact that she's in love with Felix. The love triangle subplot is more interesting than it sounds. Felix, Ulrika, and Max all are pretty high-tier warriors and lead very dangerous lives, and so love is a hard concept for them to figure out. Max is a wizard, and thus people distrust him, and he is super attracted to Ulrika, but she doesn't like him that way. Friend-zoned! Felix is a normal guy. He is weirded out by his feelings at times, and well, like a German, he gets drunk and makes an ass out of himself. He never gets friend-zoned, but he will verbally fight with Ulrika now and again. I think Billy Boy King actually had a relationship with a woman, unlike other writers, because this novel really nails what it's like to date a strong-willed woman that you love, but at times can't stand to be around. And thankfully, we also never get any cringe sex scenes. Thanks, Sigmar. The final battle with the dragon is bloody epic, and Felix gets powered up by his animal sword and stabs the dragon in the brain! I like that most of the time it's Gotrek that kills the final boss, but by having Felix do it this time, you vary up the narrative and make sure that Felix pulls his narrative weight and never feels like the dud of the story. This is a partnership like, the Tick and Arthur. Wait a minute, does that make Ulrika Captain Liberty and Max Batman Wells / Deflator Mouse? Please, let that never be a show. Anyway, the novel ends with the bros fighting in a massive scrum. You got orcs, you got human bandits, they're all fighting each other. Gotrek gets to slay the orc war boss, and the Spirit of Grungai shows up just in time to drop some bombs on the remaining orc and human bandits. Felix and Ulrika make up, and Max gets used to being friend-zoned. But not is all well. They slayed a dragon and opened up the trade routes, but the Chaos Army is still on the march, and Grey Seer Asshole is in deep trouble. big shock there. The end. Coming back to this novel after 5 or so years since the last reread, I gotta say the Warhammer world and William King get everything right. The characters are well developed and feel like human beings. The world is understandable with legit grounded rules, and there is no crap, no bloat, just pure fantasy fun. If it's been nigh on 10 years since you broke out your copy of Dragonslayer, I cannot recommend rereading it enough. It has stood the test of time and will catapult you into an epic fantasy world of cool dudes doing cool things and killing the shit out of evildoers. I am GeneralLotz, wishing you good Night of the Sun and good Bretonian nights, whatever makes you happy. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing and please consider leaving a like or a comment, as the algorithm desires your soul. And I want to thank all those fans who have supported this channel, both past and present.